thank you very much for coming here this afternoon in this panel about media of the future in the frame of the Futurelab, also called the Futurelab Day, in this festival this year. My name is Nicolas Naveau. I will try to moderate as good as I can this session, but the biggest work will be done from my dear panelists today that will present after. Maybe very short, a little bit of the frame of today's discussion and a few thoughts to introduce the further discussion. And I will read it because I'm not that good by learning to listen. It's okay for you. The questions raised by the theme of this year's festival are numerous, and the approach of the Futurelab under the theme of creative resilience seems opportune. But however, I would like to question our need for resilience. Do we really want to return to our current state or to our past state? In face of the profound transformation that are taking place now. Do we want to return to the system that is at the origin of our troubles? And I think that if there is something like creative resilience, then creativity should serve for equitable adaptation and the necessary transformation. And here, the media plays a big role. Media journalists have a decisive role to play here as mediator between facts and their interpretation, and between access to individual information and the representation of collective values. The artists, on the other hand, have always had their own language, allowing the large number of people to access to critical reflection. And it seemed interesting to us to look more closely at this convergence of those two bodies that we will call here artistic journalism. It's very visible at the festival. I don't know if you have seen already the exhibition, but you have many works that I would or we would define this kind of artistic journalism. And we will question ourselves too on these new possible forms of media. This is for the introduction. And now I will introduce my dear panelists very quick, and there is a small introduction, and each panelist will then have a very super short presentation, so it's not too annoying, like super speed. And then the discussion will start, and at any point, at any time, you can raise your hand and someone will bring you a mic if you have something to say or if you've got a question or a comment on the discussion. Yeah, the panelist is ready. On my right side, or on the left of me, this is Rashin Fahandej. Rashin is an artist, filmmaker, assistant professor of emerging media at Emerson College, and research fellow at MIT Open Documentary Lab. She received the award of distinction at the Ars Electronica last year in the category Digital Music and Sound Art for her work A Father's Lullaby. And in her project, her project centers on marginalized voices, the role of media, new technology, community and co-creation, and this to ignite social discussion and social change. She's a proponent of art as ecosystem, and she defines her project as a poetic cyber movement for social justice, where art mobilizes a plethora of voices by creating connection between public places and virtual spaces. So my question to you is talking about creative resilience. Oh, no, excuse us. We have no time for that. It should be wrong. Yes. My question to you is talking about creative resilience and the ability to creatively adapt. How can media and art as a unit pave the new way of society. Okay.
Hi everyone. I'm quite excited to be here, and thank you for the invitation, Nico. To answer this question, I'm a firm believer. I'm a firm believer of democratizing tools that they have power. And art and creative imaginations or tools with the power that they transcend us beyond the presumed boundaries and boxes, and they enable us to tackle issues with a wider perspective, with radical imagination, and which is a much more holistic perspective. So with that, in my practice and in general, I'm a proponent of not just considering creative problem solving and artistic approaches as a professional field, but how it can be shared with a wider community as a way of thinking about solution finding and problem solving for society. My artistic practice meets at the juncture, hopefully you can read it, media or emerging media, co-creation, community co-creation, social justice issue, and I believe that emerging medias provide us with the languages and connect us and allows us to be a speculative community co-creation or bring us from the collective wisdom. I really highly recommend it. There's a new book coming out from MIT Press. It's called Collective Wisdom. That it's a lot of examples of community co-creation. It says offering alternative to single authorship vision by reframing the ethic of who creates, how and why, and interprets the word and seek to change it through the lens of equity and justice. And I go a little bit into that. Another concept that I want to quickly introduce, as Nico mentioned, is the idea of art as ecosystem. When the human society has complex issues and the social challenges are intersectional, they're not isolated elements in the vacuum. And most of the time, we are trying to solve them in order to simplify them, we solve them in a vacuum, and that's the problem. That's the way that we cannot create solution. As an artistic approach, I'm thinking about how we as an artist could enforce ourselves into spaces and create alternative ecosystems using the tools that we have and sharing the tools that we have. And the idea of art as ecosystem is a network of collaborations with individuals, communities, institutions that allows for multiplicity of perspective and narrative to coexist. And the creative process itself becomes an opportunity to collectively investigate social system and shift the dominant narratives around these issues. So I want to just show you a quick example of the project that I've been working on for the past 7 years now. That is an example of that artistic ecosystem that I'm talking about. I'll go through the slides very quickly, but I wanted to show you a brief video. This is like less than a minute, just to get you a sense of visuals and sonic spaces.
Well, when I first got sentenced, I was sentenced to 360 months, or 30 years. 28-year-old son now, he was 7 years old. And his twins, they were 45 days old. Now, just been released a few months ago. They're 21.
Like some songs, like some songs, in one place within lives, transcendent dissolves, wrapping bones and early silence.
So this project is called A Father's Lullaby, and it's about the issue of mass incarceration in the United States and the racial bias, systemic racial bias in the United States. So thinking about data, we just, some of us came from the amazing presentation downstairs and thinking about how approaching these, this is another element of thinking about data and how that could be visualized in a way that aesthetically bring us close to issues that maybe we personally don't connect with. So there is multiple elements on it. There is an immersive component of it to think about data, aesthetic, and beauty and journalism could come together in a way that connect us emotionally through the artistic experience. And the project exists in many different forms: immersive installation, shipping container that it could go to different places, gallery spaces in conjunction with other work, sound installations, and it is based on this idea of and the processes and methodologies of co-creation, which is essential to my work. Thinking about, we cannot just envision a different world. We have to, our processes should embody that vision. And with that, I work closely with fathers who are released just recently from federal prison after 20 years, 15 years of being away and being locked down. And they become artistic collaborators using the technology, using the 360 video, working with volumetric. They are not artists, they are not identifying themselves as an artist, but the artistic process becomes an incredible, powerful space to connect people across discipline with different experiences and from diverse perspectives. So they work with probation officers who are supervising them in the classroom, with a student from journalism department, media arts, and institute. So I think I went longer, I'm sorry, but I feel like the power of art and creative thinking allowed us to create new ecosystems, create spaces that is alternative way of engaging with each other and create new social memories.
Thank you very much, Rashin. Very, very great. Waiting for the other part of the discussion is this co-creation part. That's really something to share with other colleagues after. And now I would just like to introduce Takeshi Yamada, here on my left. Takeshi Yamada is a senior fellow at Nikkei Innovation Lab. And Nikkei is one of the biggest media companies in Japan. In collaboration with Ars Electronica Futurelab, we made this work data space that maybe you have seen before. If not, there will be a short show this evening during the Futurelab night. And Takeshi is a specialist for artificial intelligence, mixed reality, and art. And he received different prizes and several awards for his work. And my question to you is, coming from a technical and artistic background and working for a financial newspaper, what is your perspective on the need for innovation of journalistic practices?
Thank you. So I think the news media and really want to really need innovation. So, excuse me. Great. So that's why. So so because the news companies still deliver by news by text, only text, and some photos. So that's why we thought that news media will need an innovation and challenge. That's why. So we established the innovation lab, even though we are newspaper companies. So I wanted to show some of my project. I want to introduce something. That this image was taken by a satellite in February of this year. So it was taken near the Ukrainian border just before the war lockout. So we used satellites quickly and to detect the situation. And we visualized how the war was begun. And next, I'd like to introduce some art project in museum. It's called European Masterpiece Timeline. So I created a digital chronology with Metropolitan Museum of the Art in New York. So each dot depicts one of the masterpieces that have helped to define the long history of Europe. And in a repeated process of assembling and disassembling, so the dots come together to form a single painting. Is that in our museum project? So I would like to introduce finally. So I would like to introduce that is a great project. So how can the user experience the economy? And what if the economy index was linked to your daily life? And that is my answer.
Nikkei Blend. The world's first coffee linked to the stock market. Its taste changes in real time with the Nikkei stock average, allowing people to literally get a taste of the economy. Based on the real-time stock data, our specially developed machine, equipped with 5 motors, controls the blend of the 5 different coffee beans. A customized algorithm produces coffee that gets more bitter when the stock rises and more sour when it drops. We also created a system that converts the Nikkei stock average data into logos in real time. A different logo was printed on each cup. By scanning this logo with AR technology, people could read the most up-to-date economic news. Nikkei Blend became a hot topic around the country. Get a taste of the economy.
Thank you.
Nikkei Blend.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Arigato. Yeah. If you want to taste economy, so you should come to Tokyo. Thanks so much.
Thank you very, very much. Yes, my next panelist is sitting just close to me. It's Nobuyuki Oishi. He's working at Nikkei Innovation Lab too. And he has been working as newspaper and television journalist for over 30 years. Being a former Nikkei's incident bureau chief covering the South Pacific, he is now a senior producer at Nikkei Inc. big company. He's currently in charge of developing new digital media, including video and audio. And as mentioned, one big actual project is data space, the global impact of the Russian war on Ukraine. And if you are lucky, you just came from this project, and if not, just come again a little bit, maybe another time to Ars Electronica, and you will have a chance to see this. My question to you, Nobuyuki-san, is would you tell us a little bit more about the unique perspective that we have seen, or been researching within the collaboration for data space, and how can this immersive media and artistic language form one possibility of understanding our complex work from a new point of view? Thank you. I guess you just speak. Okay. Should be on.
Thank you very much for introduction. And so before answering your questions, so I'm going to talk about why I'm here and
Should I click?
Yeah.
Just the next.
Yes. And Yamada-san explained what the Nikkei is, so maybe you understand that we are very, we have a variety of people, and he's a researcher. Actually, I am not belong to the Innovation Lab.
Just Nikkei.
Just Nikkei. And I've been a journalist for a long, long time. And anyway, first of all, let me explain my family a little bit. Nikkei, and next please. And Nikkei is a business newspaper, and I think a daily circulation is around 2.7 million copies daily. And next please. And as Yamada-san explained, the Nikkei Index 225 is our product. And next please. And UK's Financial Times is our group company, and TV Tokyo is also a group company, and it's famous for Pokemon, and Pokemon TV station. And by the way, so why I'm here? So the reason I'm here is related to dinosaur. Newspaper can become extinct like a dinosaur. Next please. The total circulation, it's a daily circulation in Japan, amounted about 33 million copies last year, and 30% decrease from 10 years ago. Actually, this falling trend was observed throughout the past 20 years. Next, please. Moreover, I'm very concerned with the current movement, which is so-called selective news avoidance. Many people increasingly choose to limit their exposure to news, even though we are now in an uncertain world. According to the recent report of Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, the proportion who avoid news is around 42%, comprising the those aged 25 to 34. Next, please. And I also have another concern. The number of democratic countries has been declining recently, and it looks like a slight decline, but I think it could be a big problem in the long run. I believe that the critical role of journalism is to contribute to democracy. The weakening journalism and weakening media could lead to a weakening democracy. Next, please. It is said that pain is mightier than sword. In order to survive in the uncertain world, journalists now need a new pen. I think the new pen could be art. Next, please. Olafur Eliasson, so he is a famous artist, said, art does not show people what to do, yet engaging with a good work of art can connect you to your senses, body, and mind. It can make the world felt, and this felt feeling may spur thinking, engagement, and even action. Next, please. I believe in the power of art, so this is the reason why I'm here. So we developed new news media data space jointly with Ars Electronica Futurelab, and now let me explain the concept behind the data space. Next, please. The story started with this word, shinbun. The Japanese word shinbun means a newspaper. The shinbun is written in kanji characters. Kanji is a pictograph. Each kanji has its meaning. Next, please. The first character means new. The second character means listen. Please look carefully at the second kanji. This one. And can you imagine where this pictograph came from? So next, please. This came from rough sketches of a gate and a year. Now you can understand what the kanji means. The word shimbun has more than 1,000 years of history, and now I think it's become outdated. So we need something of a new concept that has a holistic approach to cover both physical senses and the mind. Next, please. So I created a new kanji for the future newspaper, like data space. That is below. The second character is different from the above. The orange part is different. And now please look closely at the orange part, what this pictograph represents. I zoom in on the orange part. Next, please. It's a body. Next, please. The new kanji word for the future shimbun means new immersive experience. We can think deeply and slowly by feeling the news through our body. In a fast-paced world, what is needed is to think deeply and slowly. Next, please. Now I will give you a short glimpse of data space. Maybe many people, I believe you already seen this one. But I will explain a little bit. The participants wear 3D glasses and experience the various impact of Ukraine war, such as sharp rises in natural resources and commodity prices, a number of refugees, the military expenditures. After the immersive data experience, the participants can think and discuss together. And next, please. Oh. No. Okay. Data space is one of the artistic journalism experiments to create commons for dialogue with others. I believe our experiment will enhance our creative resilience and help us to understand the complex world from a new point of view.
Thank you very much, Rashin. And there is, I guess, a lot of to speak about after this connection between democratic decrease and information avoidance. It could be a topic in the role of art in that. But first, I would just like to introduce Joanna from Great Britain. Joanna Wright is an artist. She's showing one piece this year at the Ars Electronica Festival at the University. She won a prize, honorary mention for digital community. She's a fellow at the MIT Open Documentary Lab and honorary senior research fellow at Bangor University in Wales, in the UK. As I said, she received an honorary mention, the prix, for her work at Tomsa. And I invite everybody of you to see her work at the university. It is in the Saga Art exhibition. She's an internationally supported artist who works with photography, film, archive, and digital platform, and often being in long-term collaboration with communities, collections, and scientists on projects that re-examine established narratives. And on that way, there is, I guess, a strong connection with the Rashin. And my question to you, Joanna, is despite the big variety of methods that you as an artist use for your work, you stated during your preparation that you have a special passion and fascination for archive. Hence, my first question to you, talking about methods in the practice of artistic journalism, how can exploring the past help to explain the future?
Thank you. Oh, is it working? Hello? This way. Need to be closer? Okay.
Okay, thank you, Nicola, and thank you to Ars Electronica for having me. And thanks for this question. It's something that I've been thinking about for quite a long time. So since around 2010, I've been working at a nuclear power station in rural Wales that's undergoing decommissioning process. One of the first to fully go through this process internationally. The project's called Atomfa and Other Stories, and Atomfa is a Welsh word. It literally means nuclear power station. And through this work, I've been given access to the power station archives, which are completely uncatalogued and are being destroyed alongside the decommissioning process. They begin with a public inquiry in around 1957, and projecting to propose planning for events that will not happen until everyone in this room is dead. And so this frame has made me think really deeply on two questions, which are: how did people in the past think about the future, and how will the future think about us? And it's also really made me evaluate the frame and the structure of non-fiction storytelling. And in this case, the story is multi-generational, and that's something that's been really important in the approach that I've taken, which has been very focused on bringing together generations and media education and media literacy. And it's a story that has a beginning but no end in my lifetime. So it's a conversation for me with a future generation. And one of the things that I've returned to a lot in my work is the relationship between people and environment and economy, especially in a rural context. In Wales, where I come from, it's a minority language culture that's not widely known, and media stories have historically been told most dominantly from the outside rather than from the inside. And this was especially visible kind of through news archives about the nuclear site. And one of the things that we've aimed to do in the project Atomfa is to work in a co-creative way. Rashin and I are actually colleagues in the co-creation studio at MIT, and I think it's sort of like a place that brings together people who have a desire to take on a new approach in storytelling. So it's really important, I think, that the record of a socio-cultural impact of a site like this is not lost. And in this kind of destroying of non-essential documents, it's really a destroying of like, what was the culture thinking, what was it doing at the kind of time. If you go back to the previous slide, I just want to explain what this slide is. This is building the foundations of the nuclear power station. So you can see here the kind of technology that was being used for this thing that was very high-tech in its day, but we might look at this image and think, it's a bit worrying. So I've been working recently with a marine ecologist, and in his work he talks a lot about shifting baseline syndrome, which I'm not sure if it's something that people are familiar with, but it's a situation where over time knowledge is lost about the state of the natural world because people can't perceive changes that are taking place around them. So in this way, each generation, perception of change are out of kilter with the changes that are actually taking place in the environment. And I think that this can be also applied more widely to kind of ideas around cultural change. So if we change the slide. Okay, so this slide was taken in the 1970s, the decade that I was born. And it's actually about 40 miles away from the nuclear site. It's a place called the Centre for Alternative Technology, and it still exists today. I worked here as artist in residence for a year with the Zero Carbon Britain research project. And it was set up as a living laboratory in the kind of late 1960s in an abandoned quarry site to prove how it would be possible to live with 100% renewable technology. And you can see that on this day, it's not going brilliantly well. And at the time that image was taken, the community here were completely ridiculed in the news media. What they were trying to do was seen through mainstream culture as eccentric and absurd. But in fact, technologies developed here have travelled all over the world, and we know what contemporary wind power looks like. So I would say that archives have the possibility to offer us an accessible window to overcome skepticism, to make a leap of faith, and to show that we can make critical changes happen in our lifetime for an equitable and sustainable future.
Thank you very much. The last presentation of panelists is Sarah. Sarah is a journalist.
I don't have a presentation. I have a dog with.
Sarah is a journalist and IT and net expert. She's working for the Radio E1, it's a main cultural radio in Austria.
That made people. I didn't even start yet.
But maybe some of you might know her from the Austrian Radio E1 broadcast with a focus on technical innovation and their impact on society. On her last reportage, she connects, it's connected to the data space, it is called War in Internet. And it is focusing on the digital and media aspect of the Russian war on Ukraine. And it has just been nominated, as I heard, for the Prix Europa, which is a European Prize for journalism.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, my approach is a bit different, but please, Nikkei, I so much love what your company is doing. Hire me. I just have to pack stuff in my dog, and I'm ready tomorrow to join this awesome project. And so, yeah, I basically earn my money by going to dark places. So as I'm mostly focused on IT security, this is like talking to the bad guys and meeting the places where the bad guys hang around and get their approach to see like how the world is changing. But in recent years, I also focus on how technology impacts society without us realizing, because digitalization happens so fast and we're like, okay, that's a shitstorm. And she barks when we look at her, but she's actually cool with cameras. She loves to be photographed, and she always steals my show. That's the other thing. So I started with journalism, radio journalism, and some years also in print. Should I have kept there? Like in the late 90s. So I saw like how digitalization affected at least media companies I've been with. So I'm talking mostly about Austria. I can't speak for every media organization, of course. And there is three aspects I want to stress out when it comes to like the future of media. One would be the value of creativity we have to find also as media organizations. The second is new trust models, and the third is the way, like I call them now, like quote unquote, the established media, like the pre-digital media, and a new role and how to perceive themselves. Please don't steal my show, dog. So what I mean by that, when it comes to reporting, society hasn't changed, the technology has. So a good story is a good story. We saw this awesome story, I adore it so much. And it was a good story being told. And if you started once upon a time, we all know here comes the fairy tale. So, but the ways we are able to communicate through social media, through YouTube videos, and also the audience we can reach, that has changed because it empowered people to tell their story they're passionate about. Sometimes they say, I'm not a journalist, but I really am into, I don't know, archaeology. So here's my blog, here's my podcast, here's my YouTube video, here's my gaming channel. And media, was a bit the established media organization on the high horse. Like, we own the place of creating content. So they didn't worry about much as I saw it about digitalization, we're the media houses. So when suddenly everyone was able to be creative and a journalist, they became, instead of creators, imitators, because suddenly we had this, what are the young creators doing on TikTok? Oh my God, how do do they edit the videos? Oh my God, how do they do, oh, they call it podcasts. So since I'm in radio, to talk to younger generation, I say I'm working for a vintage podcast to sound a bit cooler. And then they're like, oh wow, I haven't heard of it. Yeah, like this little radio, turn it on and it's me. And they're like, yeah, can I download it? It's like, yeah. So, but it leads to awesome discussions though. But with all this content, we also faced as a society the problems that come along with it, like a lot of news. Sometimes you have an overwhelming feeling of a lot of bad news, fake news, wrong news, manipulating news. So here I am with the first part, which the established media, who has a tradition of earning the trust of the public, might be doing in the future, at least that's my utopian hope, from the creators to the imitators, and now become the curators of the information we get every day, and to say like, which is the relevant aspects to the public? Where should we start collaborations with artists who already have, new inspiring ways, but also young creatives, I don't want to stick to those terms like call yourself an artist otherwise, and call yourself an influencer, or just have fun with what you're doing, because it will be the big media house's job to give a structure to the reality that we all share and dig deeper in events and to put them in context of the reality or the world or the society we share from sometimes also our cultural perspectives. And here I'm with the second part. I know I'm over time, right? No. Thank you, sorry. It was my dog, I will blame her. It's the creativity part, because the one thing we learn that is like, we love artists for their creative approach. We love the young people who, adapt the platforms and say like, oh, here's my new way to do a TikTok video and dirty editing because it's cooler and the audience loves it. And we're like, okay, we want to do that too. And everyone loves us when we do creative stories and think outside of the box, because the storytelling, truth to be told, it's, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a pattern. This is why AI is so great in doing sports reporting and stuff like that. But to think outside of the box, to give, a new twist to a story, a new approach, a new perspective, just like you had with your project. I mean, it's so adorable. I wish I would have made it though. And that's something that you need time for. Time that we don't give ourselves, especially in creative surroundings sometimes. So when you're in journalism, the story after the story is the story you do after the story. And creativity is like, doing your free time, like the young creatives. But to find for the future, whether it be journalism or arts or, creative spaces, give them not just the time during the work, but also pay it. So this is like my hard take on it, because with creativity, I've become very sensitive about everyone loves being creative and everyone loves the new approaches and thinking outside of the box, and then says, thank you, you're an awesome person. And I'm like, give us more space to be creative. Give us time to think, give us time to go other ways, and give us time to fail and pay it, and not let us have it just, awesome thought when I was in my bath and waiting for the eureka moment. So the curators, which also means the collaborations. Here I'm back at the arts again, A curator knows the places where it says like, on eye to eye standing next to each other, we invent something new, we dare to try a new approach, and also give more space to creativity, please, and be it, because we sometimes tend to, like a machine is fast, we have to be faster. We'll never be faster than machines, and they beat us in chess. So it's what Nikkei does already. So that's it, I've finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I hope it wasn't a lot.
question. Does anyone from you want to directly react on our talk? Or because otherwise I have one question, because you were speaking about the time, you giving more time. And for me, there is something about the time in this decision is one two different directions. One is the time of creation, and the other one is maybe the time of consumption, like this. And there is something we were talking once about slow media, and maybe I was thinking, well, maybe the art is this kind of slow media. Where when you go to an exhibition or a place to have an artistic experience, mostly you have time, you take your time to understand and to appreciate it. Maybe in comparison to normal media consumption, where you just like scroll as quick as possible. I don't know how you see it.
Yeah, I'll say something quickly about that. I mean, I think sometimes one of the advantages you have as an artist is that you're working outside a structure, and maybe sometimes with not very much money, and that in itself gives less pressure of time. I'm very conscious when I hear you talk, Sarah, that you're talking about the time pressure, and I think that's really actually unhelpful, because one of the things that I've been thinking about the last few days is how the means of telling stories has changed, but the structures have remained kind of quite the same for a long time. You know, there's a sort of top-down kind of dominance, and when you're talking about the job of news media organizations to be the curators, I think I question that a little bit and think maybe there's a space for news creation to be more dialogic and be, in that way, perhaps be more meaningful. And I say that from the point of view of having seen a lot of news about the place where I come from that's really, really disconnected from the reality of that place. And so I think there's perhaps this uncoupling of kind of making from the kind of traditional power structures is actually quite helpful from an artistic point of view.
If I just may add one, not like I call them established, though they're new, but I was thinking, I had Bellingcat in mind, for example, right? So they have a lot of data, they have crowdsourced, where does this photo come from, and do we have proof that this is the geolocation where this has happened, etc. And they curate all the data and they give it to a format. So this would be like my, let's call it, perfect example, and to take them as a role model of an approach. I see like the data space down there, what we saw, like not every outlet will have his or her own data space and be able to do that with every story, but to have it as an inspiration, like, oh my God, it's a way we could do it. That's awesome. So Bellingcat is always in my mind when I was like, and I think this also meets again you because they do it together with the public, with the help of the public on social media. So I meant it in that sense more.
I wanted to also speak to that because it's such an important concept, right? And how you differentiate it, and to think about the time of production, because it speaks to impact and it speaks to sustainability and social change. And I wanted to also differentiate two things, like when you are a studio artist or an artist in a space of collaboration with other artists versus when you're doing work with community. So the time is stretched in a very interesting way. So it's a much bigger commitment, but the impact is very different. And I often give this example because I was a studio artist and I transitioned to be socially engaged. So on my projects, I'm constantly mindful of how the creative process itself is shared with the community and it becomes that space of transformation. And it is stretched if you compare it to, for example, an artist in their studio making a mark, a painting on the wall, or you're doing edits on your own, you make that decision and that decision is done, is one mark. But when you want to do that with the community, with a group of people, that effort is stretched over months. over 50 emails and multiple. So it's a commitment. It's a big commitment, but it's a very different process in a way that allows this multiplicity of perspective and ideas and more holistic approach to coexist. And I think that in itself allows for impact in the process. And then the other aspect of it, I think, what artistic work or artistic journalism aim to do in the space of experience is to not let you flip the page or click the mouse right away. The consumer that just is devouring things without a deep dive. And I think the art could be successful when it lets you pause and then it raises questions. And then you leave the space, you have to ask each other what happened and what we should do. So that space of time is so crucial. And I think, again, like it has very direct relationship to the impact and the change, because that's slow. And that's a collective work, not individual work.
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, and see, to me, so your works, your artworks, seem very, very journalistic, and so more journalistic than we are doing. And look at recent works at the documentarian and Venice Biennale. So a lot of artworks there. It's a very journalistic. They're taking the journalistic approach. So my question is, why art become more journalistic? That's my one question. And another question is a methodology. And your method is, it's almost like a journalistic. So maybe I'd like to learn from you. So what's the kind of a method you're taking? So when you make a work, and so about.
So to your first question of thinking about why more journalistic approach, and I would sort of maybe expand it to think about instead of like a fictional kind of really taking on the real world and in a way an expanded documentary, like thinking about the real issues and real people and how that becomes sort of an artistic expression. And on my point of view, I can't speak to everybody, but I do see an urgency. I do not have the privilege at this time to create just aesthetic work that you come and immerse and you move and don't think about social issues. I don't have that privilege anymore. And I never had, but some people maybe felt it before. But I think we live at a time and a moment that there is an urgency of bringing all of our tools and skills and capacities and experiences together to act differently and to decide differently, and as a matter of fact, not really imagining a different future and be creative. We need to shift our philosophies and perspective and methodology. Because if you consider a tree, I would like imagine your most beautiful, precious tree that you can think about. You know, the leaves and the flowers, the time that is blooming, is that creative space. We manifest something in this world. The trunk is a tool that is creating that, right? Like kind of bringing that. But then the elements that we don't really talk about often is the methodology. How do we get there? And often we repeat the same, even though we have a different vision. We follow the similar methodology, which I believe won't take us too far from other visions. And then the other one is ideology and philosophy. And we also don't speak about that often. And when we don't, it doesn't mean that it's not there. it means that we are unconsciously taking on what we are consuming. And we are all the product of the system that we critique. So unless they are conscious decision for every element of ideology, philosophy, of methodology, we cannot make a different world. And that's sort of my form of invitation. And that's like every element that I'm thinking about. And I think that's why this sort of binary, isolated vacuum of different ways of thinking and engagement is not sufficient anymore. And it's against what we need as human beings, as the reality of our life is much more intersectional. So the artistic journalism versus documentary and like all of these different tools that we have, I feel it would be much more powerful if we could be having a fluidity and work with all of these tools, and I'm thinking of these sort of tentacles and this sort of futuristic approach, but it's not happening with one person. It's happening through that connections that we make in the process of co-creation, I feel. And I do it with the community. Sorry, that was a bit long.
I think that I came from a slightly different background in that I was a documentary maker and I worked in broadcast television, and I found myself in a position where I felt really, really uncomfortable with the types of stories and the story structure that I was being asked to make. I found that they had a false structure and a false kind of narrative. It wanted to use this very beginning, middle, end. There's a hero, they overcome something, and then there's a clean ending. And yeah, but for me, it was a question of ethics, because these weren't the stories that I was seeing in front of me. And so I made a really conscious decision, one that has not done any good for my bank account, which was to not work in that system anymore, and to look at the other ways that I might work also with community to tell stories. And I think this question of archive, I guess this bit out of my talk because I was nervous, but I think with media it's really like archive, like there's a lot of power in them, who makes them, who gets to decide what goes in them, who maintains them, who writes the metadata for them. And I think in this moment as well, like this is quite a frightening question, because actually I learned in the last year that a lot of metadata for visual archives is being written by AI, and I know that AI is not very good at describing the sort of nuance of image, and I think this sets up something for the future where we think, at the moment there's a kind of ability to look back with very kind of analog archive material, even if how we see it in this time is different, but this, sorry, it's a bit of a tangent from your question, but I think it's something quite important, like what, if the future archives are being written by AI, what are they going to look like, and what kinds of storytelling will they facilitate in the future? Anyway, excuse my tangent.
I would have a question. We are all asking questions to the colleagues from Nikkei, because I'm like impressed that a media house like Nikkei was saying, like, we invest in looking into the future of journalism, what it'd be like, because you have the data, you own the data, you have the index. So one would think, like, why would they do that? What kind of experience was that for you? Was it, or does it come natural out of your culture? Because as I said before, I envy you, but I also think, like, when I look there, that you said measurements of how we maybe should think or act. Because it's, to me here at least, I don't know of very many media houses who say, like, we want to afford that.
Yeah, actually, it's, to tell the truth, so we don't have any specific strategy towards the future media. So we can do anything we can. So that is the coffee machine is one example, and this data space is one example. Well, I believe that compared to the other newspaper company in Japan, so we are very unique. So other companies don't do like experiments, challenges. And also this project is started from two of us. So we we go to the same graduate school actually the same time, and so I'm over 50, but I started studying art, and we belong to the same graduate school of art university in Kyoto. And so I guess that Oiwa, actually he already graduates at university. And so now we are art students, so we have to do something new. So we started the project. So it's my personal idea. So, but after starting this project, so I explained senior people. So actually, I say that I'm not a member of Nikkei Innovation Lab. I belong to the other department, but I asked the top of the innovation lab. He said that he's okay, so you can do that. So I contacted with Ogawa-san. I started the project. So in this sense, my company is quite generous. So if you want to join, maybe it's okay.
If you want to, I'm already in my mind. Don't forget.
And people here, so please visit Tokyo and come to my office. And so Innovation is very open to very talented people.
I'm hoping for a good coffee day.
There is one point, because you were speaking about ethic, and before you two are like, okay, now I'm changing my position, getting uncomfortable because I cannot believe anymore in making these beautiful stories and kind of making a reality check and this kind of thing. And this is something that you said for me in your slides before, having these 2 points of user avoidance combined with democracy decrease. And for me, okay, this is kind of reality check to and say, okay, I have to change something. I have to change the way that we are doing the news because something is wrong going, definitely. Which brings me to one question to the artist, because, and it's the same one to the journalist part, so to say. It's about trust. Because of course, so the question of trust and journalism is quite old and still new. So and there is a point here, but the other position is maybe for me more new. It's like, okay, trust me, I'm an artist. Is it a point? How do you give your public or the people you're talking to this attitude? Yeah, you can trust me. It's just I'm an artist. I'm like, okay, I'm free of any science or evidence-based background, so to say. So how do you deal with this trust relation that you have to build?
I mean, I can say something about it. First, it's I think it's like two main things. Like one is about the time that you're able to give something, and a kind of not being uncomfortable if you're unwelcome initially, perhaps, you know. So in terms of the nuclear site, it's even though it's like in the area where I grew up, it's very let's say like lots of rural places, it's quite factional, you know. It's like if you're not from that place, then you're outside. And part of and then also in a kind of nuclear site, when I started to work there, I came with perhaps some feelings about nuclear power, but also I wanted to come with a really open mind and be like, actually, I don't understand anything about how a nuclear power station works. And I think that openness was really important. But for me also the kind of recognition that not everyone was going to appreciate kind of having someone there who was taking a different approach, and it wasn't my job to force them either. But the main thing was just the time that I was able to spend. I think after like a couple of years, people could see that I was serious and that my intentions were serious, and the work that we did was very embedded in community, and that time made a huge difference. And similarly, when I was embedded as an artist in residence with this research project, looking at how the UK could run zero carbon using only existing technology. It's a research project that's run since the 70s. And when I arrived there, they said, oh, we need you to make an artwork that's going to change how human beings think about the future. And I was like, if I could do that, we'd all be fine. But the scientists in that team were really actually angry about the fact that they had to have an artist in residence in their team, but the research director had felt like the kind of main obstacles in their work was a question of communication and acceptance to kind of make the culture shift. So I think they were very brave actually to invite an artist, but again, for me it was like just spending time and listening, and it comes to really what you were talking about, I think, with the new listening, and I think that is something really important.
To speak to that, maybe I'll go back to the metaphor of the tree, because I didn't finish that. When we talked about the ethics and the philosophy and methodology, I'm thinking about the roots of that tree, that is always as big as it's compared always, or bigger than the branches. And I feel it's essential to set those in everyday spaces that we are, and have it in written and writing and communally writing it and coming back to it, because the social forces are constructed in a way that they always take us away from that future vision. Like we are going against the current. And if you don't have something concrete that we could come back to, and it can be evolving and changing as we are learning and we are reflecting, but you need that framework and philosophy. And the reason I want to emphasize on it is that we assume journalism, is about truthfulness, right? Or about giving you information. But we are living in the age that there is like, what is truth? And who is telling the truth, right? So we are living in an age that we need new languages, and we need new definition of how we do things. And I think without that philosophical and ideological framework, there is no way of living this and setting it again, actively and consciously. So in my work, we talk. So in my work, there are students, for example, in one of the example is the pedagogy that I do of co-creation. It's having students from 3 different departments. They have different experiences, different expertise, different life experiences. We have probation officers who supervise the men, and we have men who just released from the prison who are being supervised. So there's many different power dynamic is happening, and that's happening in an institutional space, right? It's essential to set grounds to think about how are we shifting these power dynamics. It's not enough to put people in the space, and these sort of talking about what it means, the expertise of the lived experiences of the community member. So when I'm there, I'm not an expert anymore. I'm one voice among others. And how is it possible to use this space to see different perspectives and put that in the philosophy? So we go back to time, that this is commitment, this is time. And I think that's really kind of important aspect of this work, that it takes time, it takes energy, and it will be longer. But I think that's the way that it's possible to create rippling effect. Because what I think, I just came from Venice Biennial, and there were 2 really wonderful pieces in the immersive space. And when I'm thinking about Holocaust and about incarcerations and about history and archive, and how that history is lost to us, so we don't learn from it. And that's so important, to learn from the things that have happened in the past and reflect on them. So I want to mention that because the negative forces in this world are quite active and very precise in every action. So as positive forces, as people who are thinking of differently in a positive way, there is that necessity to really be mindful and strategic. And there is a book, unfortunately I don't know the name on top of my head now, it's coming out about, that this was a research from Harvard, about non-violence movements across the world and comparing them to violence movements in terms of positive change. And what was the outcome? And a lot of time we think about when there are forces, it's when the change happened. But actually the data and the research showed that when people were strategic, they were learning and they were doing it collectively, that's across the world, that's when the change happened. And it was much higher rate than the violent forces. So that's what I want to kind of leave it with, that we need time, but also there is urgency of being mindful and strategic and working collectively.
So can I say, I find an interesting survey that is done by Financial Times, and the report said that there's huge gap between the facts the reader want and we media provide. And so according to the report, readers spend more time on educational and storytelling articles than breaking news. And we journalists, so maybe you too, write breaking news, and we want to update readers minutes by minutes. But actually, what the reader wants is different. So we need to change the contents, and we have to also change the interface. So that's a key point. But as I said before, so we don't have any specific strategy. Art could be one solution. And but anyway, so if we keep updating the readers minutes by minutes, so maybe we will lose the trust, and the role of the journalism could be weakened, and that's also lead to weakening the democracy. So that's my concern.
So, I mean, the good news for myself is I work, okay, I talk fast, is that I work in the science department, so I'm mostly talking to researchers, and I'm allowed to have, like, the shortest would be 5 minutes. If I say, like, I need 2 hours because this needs the reporting, I find my niche there. We don't have advertisements and stuff like that. So I have a freedom I always have been longing for within this public radio station, also addressing that, because I fled all the others where they want the hero stories from you, and you come to the why am I even existing, and you question your own reality. So I'm like now where I really love to be. So listen to this vintage podcast if you find the time. It's really cool, and it has no commercials. But I want to come when it comes to arts and how, you know, like we profit also for inspiration from artwork. He showed before in your slide, you showed like the data from satellites showing that the war in Ukraine will soon start. So the same thing happened on Twitter, because someone who is really into data and into Google, he noticed that there's a traffic jam on the border, and he tweeted like, there's a traffic jam on the border to Ukraine. And this was from all the mobile phones sending their data to Google, and Google predicting the traffic jam, though it was armed forces going there. So suddenly Google turned off the service very quickly because it would give a war advantage to one or other side. And to come to that, which led me, because we don't have the satellite data, I didn't look at that, there is this artist, his name is Simon Beckert, and I think some month ago, he made this nice experiment for all of us to learn how this thing with a traffic jam and Google Maps works. And he took like 99 smartphones in a little carriage and carried them around in the streets. And wherever you went, you saw the traffic jam. And people avoided the place because these 99 smartphones sent their data to Google and you had this traffic jam. He made an artwork out of it. But we as journalists, at least I was, so hooked. I was like, I want to interview this guy. He found an approach, a new way of telling his story where I, as a journalist, was, tempted to use my technical approach to give people the technical explanation why that is possible. And he, as an artist, he had this idea, I envy him for that, but to walk around with 99 smartphones, do the traffic jam. And that was an inspiration. I will forever have it in my mind because it was awesome and it helped me to rethink what I'm doing and the approaches I'm doing. So also in, let's say, half private, I need your inspiration to question myself as a journalist and to say like, oh my God, there are new ways. And also this, can we do it together, please? Like, where both of us are happy in the end. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. We are close to the end, but I think that there is one special public because before, when you were talking about the strategic and stuff, I guess you just recognize you. Sorry, and if you are okay, that I just directly ask you because I guess in what she was saying before, there is something when maybe you can talk about your experience as an artist. Eric worked a lot for the Hong Konger movement. And he was, as a representative for the citizen, taking the prize for Silicon Valley for this e-water. And I guess it's a strategic position of the artist in the society. I just thought, or maybe it's like resonating or strong in your mind. And if you have one comment before the 5 minutes or 2 minutes that we have to quit.
Wow, okay. I think it's good. Well, thank you for everyone sharing such an insightful information and stuff. What should I share you? Back then in 2020, what I did was like, I don't know if it's a generous approach, but we think that Hong Kongers did the protest is a very, the digital activism is very strong, like the order, the way how we use digital technology for the protest, how we mobilize the inner city, and that was really amazing. So that's why I collect all the data at a certain point and make up a PowerPoint, and I send it to Ars Electronica digital community, and then I think Hong Konger has to be awarded. So that's why I nominate. I'm kind of like messengers, telling Ars Electronica, okay, this is Hong Kong should be awarded, and then they give a golden Nikkei to Hong Kongers, not to me. I mean, I dedicate it to Hong Kongers. So all Hong Kong protesters are the awardee in that project. So I don't know if that's an approach how we kind of, as an artist, kind of re-understanding the situation of an environment and of a city, but at the same time reimagining an award, how it can be presented in a domain, which media. I mean, Ars Electronica pretty much my media at that point. So that the award itself is how I channel the message out. So I think that's something relatable. And in terms of journalism, when you guys are talking, I was also imagining the situation when Hong Kong happened, the protests happened, a lot of online media has generated because there were official media that was controlled by government, but then people need more of the truth, So there are a lot of online media going online streaming, like Facebook, YouTube on the street, like shooting the protest, so that we know where to go, we know what's happening on the street, we know police brutality is real and everything. So that's what's kind of related to how the open journalism can happen. A lot of them going out there, like, you know, primary school students, high school students, they don't have any skills, they just have a smartphone. Because a smartphone, you can just click a button and do streaming. And the reporting is real without any additional seasoning, because it's right there at that time. You can't fake live streaming. So that's really an interesting dynamic at that time, and it's quite amazing to me. And I think that's applied to many other protests right now in different places. So I think that's really interesting. However, now maybe a question discussion that we're able to do is actually I'm really curious to ask you guys, as you're all professional in journalism, documentary. What if now, I mean not what if, now Hong Kong is losing the freedom of press? Like, you know, Apple Daily and other pro-democracy media has, I mean, the CEO has been arrested and now is in jail, and, you know, the company is closed down, and, you know, the only pro-democracy media has gone, and like all of them basically, and now remaining only like government-controlled media in Hong Kong. What can we do with that? I mean, like there was discussion about how Hong Kongers diaspora can do media out of Hong Kong, do news out of Hong Kong, targeting Hong Kong, but outside of Hong Kong. It's kind of this reverse news because they need a different narrative than the government. But I mean, if there's any suggestion or example that you can put and give me, I can tell them for us to do news again, to tell people the truth again. That would be very appreciated.
Can I just say something quickly? You know, I grew up in Iran, and I grew up as a persecuted minority. So my lens to all of the work that I do comes from that sort of experience. But also, at the same time, Baha'i community was and is such a vibrant community, despite all the discriminations and persecutions that are ongoing. Iran has been dealing with that, since the revolution, right? And one thing is that it's crucial, like this sort of network of international people being able to do, like, I think the only way Iran gets the news, get voices is reverse, but happening a lot of it that the outlets here receiving these sort of citizen journalism, people on their phone recording and then sending them, and then they would play it back, and then it creates discussion. But of course, it's powerful, it's so powerful that the government wants to execute those journalism outside of Iran who are becoming the voice for the people inside Iran. So there's a power in that, but it needs to be mobilized, and it needs to be kind of like mass, and it needs to have network outside, absolutely. I think the only way that Baha'is have not been persecuted and this, persecuted in a way of distinguished is the force of international, right? And of course, when you have things happen in the world, people going on the war, or like the things that we had in, these sort of turmoils give permission to every government to bring up their worst act. So, and that's why it's so important to sort of mobilize single voices, and they do have power, I say, from that sort of experience.
And I will just add, no worries. But if you look at Russia, but if you look at Russia, and Medusa did the same. It was like the free, non-public controlled media. They moved to Berlin, and now they are sending back to Russia. And the other narrative, which is there's a war going on from Berlin and from other sites, to reach the people inside there. It's come to a bit of a, is the internet free or not free? But it just underlines what you just said, and this is an established method And also, I think during World War II, it also was with papers that threw down for planes, right? And to organize outside of the country where you have the threat and bring the news back in. And yeah, I just can underline it and just want to mention, like, it's right now happening for the citizens in Russia who are bombarded with state propaganda right now.
I'm deeply sorry that we have to close this channel. Yeah, when it started to be super interesting, I know, it's always the same.
One comment.
Okay, one comment.
So, I think you're now based in Tokyo,
Yes.
right? So, Japan, I believe, the freedom of journalism. So we have, no? So maybe we can work together.
Yeah. So I guess this is the best ending we could have now. Thank you both very much. I will not, no, you want to say one keyword? Okay. But this was the most beautiful one. Okay, so the last question, just one word, okay, not more, just like one. Your utopia for the media of the future. One word. Okay.
Dialogic was. I got the microphone.
Mine needs explanation, but I can tell you later if you reach out to me. I would say universal care. Care as caring and love.
And I created a new word again. It's journalist.
Journalist.
This is so we need to create this kind of person. So I want to be your first journalist. Journalist.
We need a new school for this one.
Yeah, I have one new dream, so I will become the journalist. An artist.
I switched mine to journalist.
Okay.